Bada boom.
Hello, passionate listeners. My guest today is David Ditchfield. A few years ago, David had a freak accident in which he was dragged under a speeding train. As the surgeons fought to save him, he had a profound near-death experience, or NDE, as they call it, and journeyed to what he believed was the afterlife. When he woke up in hospital, he had acquired astonishing new abilities, which to this day he can still not explain. The first was an enhanced ability to paint. After his NDE, David felt compelled to produce dramatic and rich images of the things he saw in the afterlife, paintings so vivid and real, it was thought he had taken an HD camera with him to visually capture what most NDEs can only describe using words. Then, even more surprisingly, he started composing classical music. This newfound gift was all the more astonishing, as David, a former punk pop guitarist, has never received any training in classical music and never composed such music before his NDE. In fact, to this day, he cannot read or write a single note of musical notation. David's debut symphony, The Divine Light, expresses what he felt during his NDE. The symphony was premiered at a sell-out concert and received a standing ovation from the audience. David, I'm honored to have you on Passion Harvest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
What an incredible experience. I don't even know where to start. It's just unbelievable. I've listened to your music and it is so beautiful and so overpowering, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's great to hear.
So I guess we'll start at the beginning, your accident and how that happened.
Sure. Well, I was seeing off a friend at the rail station where I was staying at the time, and I was helping her onto the train carriage with her bags, and gave her a kiss and a hug goodbye. And as I stepped off, the emergency doors closed on my coat, and my coat had become trapped within the doors. And I tried everything I could to release that coat, but it was like a really good quality sheepskin, and it wasn't going to come loose. I tried everything, you know. I remember calling out for a guard, and no one was there. Then I hit these sort of open and close buttons either side of the doors. Nothing happened. I even banged on the doors itself, hoping it might jolt them open. But I realised then that I was trapped. So the train started to depart from the station, and eventually I lost my footing because it pulled off at great speed, and I was dragged along the platform, and then underneath the actual train itself. And so yeah, at that point I thought, well, this is it. You know, I'm going to die. I didn't expect to have survived going under a train at all. And in fact, the rail police who did a national inquiry on the whole incident said to me after everything they'd done, they turned around and they said, "You should be dead. We don't understand why you're here. We don't understand how you survived that. We've done all our maths and everything, and you know, you shouldn't have survived it." But I did, so I'm here to tell the story. And so that's really what happened. You know, the horror of it all unveiled.
And do you still have? I mean, when I hear you retell the story, I mean, the horror of it, and gosh, certainly a very emotional experience. Do you see it as a movie set, or do you still have emotions when you think of that time?
That's interesting. Do I see it as a movie set? I had lots of therapy afterwards to try and, because I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and one of the forms of therapy I did was actually called sort of video recall, where I had to go over the whole pattern of events time and time again to try and sort of like get it into my head that it wasn't such a bad thing to deal with, although that didn't really seem to make it that much better. But in all fairness, I worked very hard at all that because I needed to be able to get on a train again, because at that point I was unable to drive anymore. So I felt sort of trapped. I couldn't get anywhere, and I really wanted to sort of conquer it. So yeah, there are emotions attached to it. There always will be. But I've talked about the actual accident itself quite a few times now, so it's not too difficult for me to deal with, to actually discuss it. Yeah, because the positives that came from it afterwards are the most important aspects of it all to me, really. It's so those are the things I tend to focus on, which I'm very lucky in that sense, that I've got that to look back on, and rather than dwell on the negatives, as it were. Yeah.
So after this horrific experience, you were taken to the hospital, and the doctors managed to facilitate your survival.
That's right. Yes, they basically saved me. I had an incredible team of doctors that day that I've since learned. It was just like everything was going my way afterwards. Like there was this new consultant who just started at the hospital that they took me into, and he was very keen and proactive to save not only me but my arm, which had been decapitated. Not decapitated, sorry.
And I'm not good with blood. I really.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop.
No, that's fine.
Okay, I won't dwell on that too much. Anyway, okay. All right. So the consultant himself, he did an amazing job, and he worked very hard on looking after me. So yes, I was in hospital, and I was in the emergency department at that point, and my family had come in to see me, and they were there, stood around me, and it was at that point that I left my body and had what's called, as you said earlier, an NDE, a near-death experience. So would you like to talk a bit about that?
I would love to.
Great. Okay. Well,
and it's incredible that you can recall it. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm kind of bad at that, but it's just so fascinating that you can actually recall it. So please go on. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, of course. Yeah. It's please do feel free to interrupt anytime. Yeah. So at that point, I was obviously in a tremendous amount of pain and distress, and I suddenly went from. I remember lying there and I looking up, and all the lights were all kind of like almost like screaming into my eyes, and the noise was on overload because there was so much going on. There was a lot of frantic voices running around, trying to save me basically at that point. And I went from that to this what seemed like a beautiful darkened room, a very peaceful place, and all the pain and the anxiety had just suddenly just kind of gone from me, from my body. And so I just lay there and I thought, wow, where am I? This is beautiful. This is amazing. And I just looked ahead of my feet and I saw what looked to be an androgynous being, just kind of lit in the darkness. And this being was just kind of like staring at me very calmly and reassuringly, with a kind of like a sort of a knowing smile on this being's face. And I felt like I'd known this being, since the beginning of time or whatever, before this life and or what have you. I felt very, very familiar and at one with this being. And I suddenly looked around me, and there were like these pulsating colours, all slowly pulsating, like sort of ambers, oranges, blues, yellows, greens, and I just thought, this is so lovely. And I then looked to see how my body was looking, and as I looked down over my body, I realised that I was now covered in this kind of like blue sort of cloth, which is almost like a silk sort of satin sort of cloth, and this cloth like sort of felt very comforting It was kind of cool but warm at the same time. And I suddenly realized that all my injuries are gone. They were healed, and I could see my arms and legs where everything seemed intact, and I looked good. I was looking good. So I lay my head back down again and enjoyed this peace. And as I lay my head down, I suddenly realized then that I was joined by two other beings, a female form either side of me, to my left and right. And these beings were kind of like, had their hands kind of like slowly sort of hovering over the top of my body. Similar to Reiki healing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a similar kind of thing to that. And the energy that was coming from their hands was like very powerful. It's almost like this kind of like a slow pulsating energy going throughout my body. And I then kind of looked ahead of my feet, and I could see this light that was kind of coming towards me. And this light, it was like a tunnel of light. So there was like a pure white light in the middle, and then there was kind of like these slow sort of yellows and orange and red flames kind of like circling around this pure white light. And I thought, wow, this is really something quite strong, a very strong presence here. And again, I laid back my head and enjoyed this wonderful experience that I was in. And then the next thing I noticed as I looked up, there were like these three grids, I can only describe them as, of pure white light again. And I was lying, and I just stared into this white light coming from these grids. And unlike like looking into the sun or into sort of electronic lighting or whatever, man-made light, I could stare right into it, and I didn't want to lose my gaze because it just felt so comforting. And again, I could feel energy coming from this light. So by now, the sensation that I was beginning to feel was love, like an overwhelming feeling of love coming from all around me. And but it's like all the feelings of love that you could ever have in your life, whether it's from your mother, your lover, your father, or your pet cat or what have you. It was all those kind of feelings all encompassed into one. And so this was something really wonderful. And then I suddenly lay there and I thought to myself, well, what about my family? I knew that they were back in the hospital, and they were all stood around this hospital bed that I was on, and with anxiety written all across their faces. So I decided to kind of look over to one side to see if I could see them. And I realized then that I was lying on what I could only describe as being like a big slate, sort of kind of I don't know, like a plateau, which is really odd because it felt very comfortable. You wouldn't normally want to be lying on top of a piece of slate, but this felt really comfortable.
Like a plinth, sort of.
Like a plinth, yeah, indeed, yeah. And so I lay on this plinth, and I looked to one side, hoping to see my family. I don't know why I thought I'd look to the left and see them, but I looked, and as I looked down, I saw this incredible vision of, and it was like a waterfall of stars, and it was like a huge, huge waterfall. And these stars were kind of just like cascading down, and there was like shooting stars just falling right down through the middle. And it was just so powerful. And I just thought, wow, I am no longer in this small darkened room that I figured. I'm actually sort of in the middle of the universe. I felt like I was right out in space, And I looked again to gaze at this incredible sight. And the further I looked into it, the deeper I looked, I realized that these stars were cascading into other universes, other galaxies, and going into infinity. So it was just a tremendous, powerful sensation. And I I was so filled with joy, at this point. And interestingly enough, I just kind of rolled my head back over and thought, me of old would have been feeling guilty and anxious about my family and worried about them, but all those feelings are gone. It's while I was there, I had no anxiety issues, nothing at all like that. I remember lying there and saying to myself, oh, well, I'll be seeing them soon. They'll be joining me later, I'm sure, at some point. There's no doubt about it, because I believed at that point that I'd died, that I'd moved on to the next stage, as it were. So I really felt that was it. But I was quite happy with it. I was very happy to be there. It was a beautiful place. So I lay back, and then as I looked at my feet, this tunnel of light that I talked about earlier seemed to be closing in even closer, and the energy coming from it, and from that white light in the middle, and from the flames kind of slowly licking around, became so strong and so powerful that the sensation and feeling of love was like it was turned up really high, and it was just it was tremendous. And I suddenly thought to myself, this energy of light, this is kind of like, this is the source of all creation, basically. This is, to me now, I look back on it, and I figured it at the time, this to me, this is the energy of God. It's not this guy up in the sky with a long beard, and it's that's the source of all creation, and that's what I figured at that point. So yeah, and I lay my head back, and I thought, they must be preparing me for something, sending me on somewhere, because that's what it felt like. I felt like I was being prepared. And as I lay my head back, suddenly from that point, I was back in the hospital, and it was just it was like crashing back to earth, and it was quite a shock, to come from that wonderful peace to, I remember the sound of the doctors running around was even louder than before, and the light screaming into my eyes was even brighter than before, and it was like, no, I'm back into the pain zone.
Wow. So it wasn't a conscious decision to come back to the hospital?
No, not at all. On the contrary, I was quite happy to stay where I was, and yeah, so I didn't make a choice to come back. But,
what an absolutely incredible story. And when you were talking about your body on the plinth, did you see yourself as the person you were before you died? Did you see your body as the way I see you now?
Yes, I recognised my body as it was. Yeah. I know my own sort of posture and hands and everything. So yeah, it was definitely me. Yeah.
But there was no pain. There was nothing.
No, there was no pain. There was no injuries, and so yeah, all that had just. I mean, when I say that the beings of light were healing me, what I figure now is, looking back on it, that they were probably, rather than healing the physical wounds, I think they were healing healing my soul, because my soul had been through this incredible trauma. I mean, when I'd gone under that train, I was thrown into the most horrific sort of ordeal. It was just it was undescribable. I won't go into all that now, but it was just something that I wouldn't wish upon anybody. And I really believe that that's what I was being healed. I was being healed from that, taken from that trauma and taken into the peace.
I guess I want to ask you the question, and I also want to focus on all the incredible gifts that you've come back with. But what was your life like before, just leading up to that train accident?
Leading up to that point, I wasn't in a good place, actually. Just before the accident, I'd been living in London, and I'd gone to stay with my sister for a few weeks I just needed to get away from it all. As you pointed out earlier, I've been a guitarist, playing in bands and playing in groups. Basically, I'd left school without any qualifications because I'm dyslexic, although I didn't realise that at the time. And so it was a struggle, really, to get through life. I mean, I think the reason I turned to playing guitar was because I needed some kind of outlet, just to sort of try and steer me through life, as it were. But obviously, there's no real career in that. There's no money in it. So most of the time, I was taking on manual labour and work and stuff like that, and I realised actually I wasn't that good at that. I was looking around and watching all these other guys doing a brilliant job at what they were doing. I thought, what is it that I'm going to do in this life? I just can't find my niche, And but obviously I had to make ends meet, so I was getting work where I could. So obviously, all the gears were grinding for me throughout my life, and I'd just come out of a relationship that I'd been chasing after that clearly wasn't right for me at the time. So I was down on my luck, and so things were going pretty badly for me. It has to be said, at that point.
Okay, wow. And then after the accident, obviously you were healed and you started healing. You started doing these incredible paintings, which I've had a look at, and they're quite incredible, of your time. How do you describe? I'm calling it now On the Plinth, but I don't know how you describe it in general as your time in the hospital when you went to a different dimension or a different world, or you do paintings of your experience.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because they took me into theatre and operated on me for about 8 hours. The first operation was, and when I came through the next day, I was pretty shocked, knocked about from the anaesthetic, but also the operation itself. And but it's interesting because I could not move for days. I was just kind of lay. They'd given me my own room, which was really nice, but I could not move. But I remember inside feeling really fully charged with all this energy because of what had just happened to me. And I was just dying to sort of tell the world about it, but I thought, where do I start, And I remember my sister came in to visit me that night, and she was sat there and she very quietly spoke to me and said, look, is there anything I can get you? And I said, yeah, can you get me a small sketch pad and a pencil and a pencil sharpener? And she went, okay. And she just went along with what I'd asked for, wondering why on earth I'd asked for that. But I guess I was like scared at that point to sort of erase from my memory anything that had just happened to me. But of course, that wasn't going to be the case. It's still with me now, as clear as day. But I just felt this kind of strong urge, this impulse to want to paint what I'd seen, even though I'd never done anything like that before. I wanted to do this huge canvas. I thought this has got to be like a Michelangelo painting, like a big canvas. So I was very ambitious right from the off to do that. So the sketch that I did is like, I've still got it now, this little sketch pad. You can barely see what's going on because I was so weak. I remember the nurses propping up this sketch pad for me on my bed so that I could just slowly do this little drawing, which is very similar to the very first painting that I did. So the urges to come through. Once I started recovering at home, I was just painting quite prolifically. I just kept doing all these paintings. I didn't want to stop. I found this new sort of like energy that I had to continue through, and it was also very therapeutic for me because I did also have to deal with it, obviously going through such a traumatic accident. So yeah.
And you'd never painted prior?
No, never done anything like that really at all. This was a whole new thing to me, and what I found was, and I still find, is that I was discovering that I was actually channeling ideas through from elsewhere when I was doing right from the very first painting, because I was very nervous about doing the very first painting. I thought, where am I going to start?
I
But as soon
love
as I
that.
start, yes. And in fact, it was a friend of my sister's just saw me in the street. Because I used to my sister used to take me out for walks into town to get me out, walking about, and we bumped into her friend, and she'd heard I was going to start doing this painting, and she was going, "When are you going to start doing this painting anyway?" And I said, "Yeah, I need to find the right place to do it, and try, delaying it really. I think at that point, And she said, "Well, listen, we've got a studio space above our health centre that's free this week because we're closed for refurbishment. You can use that." And I went, "Okay, great." So I knew I had no choice but to start. So I went and started painting up in this room. And these friends of my sister's ended up letting me stay there for about 2 years without charging me. They said they enjoyed having me there and stuff, and they were enjoying seeing what was coming out. So that was pretty wonderful, yeah.
Sometimes we need those little universal pushes to push us to do the things we're not always ready to do. And your sister sounds lovely, by the way.
She is, yeah. She was my rock.
Oh,
Yeah.
she sounds lovely. And going back to when you say they were channeled, how were they channeled? Is it sort of like you saw the visual image, or if you want to just wouldn't mind explaining how they were channeled?
Yes, of course, yeah. Channeling it's something that you don't actually think consciously about. I don't actually sort of no, I didn't actually see anything like a vision and then it would go and I'd start painting it. It was actually helping me with my technique, if you like. It would help me to sort of like, I'd be painting and I'd let the painting develop, and then I'd stand back at the end of the day and I'd look at the canvas and I'd go, "Wow, did I just do that?" As time went on, I started to realize that it wasn't just me that was putting paint onto canvas. It was like I was getting help from elsewhere, and my spirituality had just gone up tenfold. It stayed with me. So I was like standing at the end of each day, and I was going, thank you, which I still do, by the way. Whatever happens, anything I'm creating,
I
as soon
love
as I
your
get that.
gratitude. I love it. Even from having the single room by yourself in the hospital, that gratitude is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's it's very important to me to say thanks, because you know what I mean. I do that. On the anniversary of the actual accident itself, I always find a nice quiet place. There's this little old um, chapel that dates back to 1662, I think it is, which is like a bridge chapel near where I live, and I go in there and I just send out some prayers, the exact time and date of the actual accident itself, which is 4 p.m. On this, and so it's great. So I send out my prayers of thanks for not only saving me that day, but for giving me that wonderful experience to be able to bring back with me and to share. I mean, it's kind of like my kind of like, I figured right from the off that they sent me back for a reason. That's what I kept saying. I lay in hospital thinking, why did they send me back? Why did I just have that experience and then come back? There must be a reason, because as we said earlier, I didn't choose to come back, so there must be a reason. And I figure now that the reason is that these ideas are coming through in my music and my art to be able to get the message out to people that that death is nothing to fear. It's a beautiful place that we all go to afterwards, and that it's not an illusion. I can assure you. It's I would not turn around and say that I do not fear death if I thought for 1 minute that it could have been sort of anything but a reality that happened to me. that day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that in a minute. I just wanted to ask,
Mm.
when you channel the paintings, do you
Mm.
feel that it's always the same channel or the same spirit or the same person energy that enables
Um,
you to paint, or is it different?
yeah, I never do feel like that actually. I feel like there's that I've got different spirit guides helping me. I mean, I've been told that as well. That I think we all have. We've all got, quite a few various spirit guides that are with us, our angels or whatever you'd like to call it. So I definitely think that it's more than one. Because also the technique that comes through there's a variance in style, I guess, in a sense, and in as much as some of it is very like a precise technical, like if I'm painting a line or a curve, it's unlike before, although it's very messy and stuff like that. I'm suddenly finding that in my paintings that I'm becoming very organized and tidy in the way I can produce a line or a curve with a paintbrush, and that's very out of character for me. And then there are other elements will come through, like complete use of colors that I wouldn't, that are different to me before. But people used to joke that why don't you put some color in your life? You walk into your apartment, you need some. Open your windows, get some bright lights in here, and I was always quite happy with kind of like lack of color.
Right.
Whereas now I look at these paintings and even in my skin tones, when I paint skin tones, I don't just see like what you'd expect is kind of one skin tone. I see blues and greens and stuff that suddenly appear and I think that's good. I'm just going to do it. I let myself flow as well. I don't restrict myself. The first time I remember putting like some light blue into a skin tone, I thought, am I going to completely wreck this painting now by doing it? But I'm kind of fearless, and I just want no, put it in, and you know what? It worked. It just kind of gives the skin tone a more of a dimension. So yeah, so there's definitely more influences coming through than one.
How absolutely amazing. And I guess, is it a similar pattern with your music, which I've just been listening to and is absolutely inspiring and beautiful?
Oh, thank you. Thank you
I
so much.
love it. I love it. I love it.
Oh.
Do you find, I mean, you can't even read music. How do you create these incredible pieces?
Yes, well, it's interesting. It all started because I I I went to for some spiritual healing not long after I'd come out of hospital because I was very keen to find not answers, but I wanted to share my story with people who I felt would understand it, And I knew that there was a spiritualist church in the town where my sister was living because it's just by coincidence. So some months before, I'd been up to visit my sister, and on the train journey there, I bumped into a group of people, and they said I got chatting to them. They were a really interesting group. We were just chatting about general things, and right at the end of the conversation, they said, "It's great to meet you." They said, "Hey, listen, there's a medium in town tonight. We're going to go and see her. Why don't you join us?" And I went, "Hey, okay, that'd be great." So I just went just for the social vibe, as it were, and and turned up at the spiritualist church, and so this medium was like darting backwards and forwards. I remember she was very animated, and she was giving people predictions. Not talking about family members being with them. Most people wanted to connect with their loved ones and what have you. I wasn't. I got no reason other than just to socialise at that point. And then she turned around, this medium, and she stopped and she went, "Gentleman in the blue jumper." She said, "Your life is about to change." And I went, "Oh, great." And I was thinking, what's this, money, relationship improvement or whatever. And she said, I said, "What, in what way?" And she said, "They're not telling me. They just said, your life's going to change. It's going to be big and be prepared for it." And I went, "Okay, I'll take that." And looking back on it, I just kind of thought, I wonder whether that was the kind of precursor for what was about to happen to me, you know. So I was very keen to find this church, and so I found it, and I went in there, and as I say, I sat through a service, and at that point, my arm was all kind of still covered in all plastics and everything. I was all kind of hoisted together, and so they could see that I was in a bad way. And then a German lady walked over to me, and she said, "We don't normally say this, but I can see, you know, you're looking pretty bad there, and we do spiritual healing on Thursday evenings. If you're interested, come along." And I went, "That sounds good. I will." So I did do, and I ended up going for quite some time because I found it to be very, very peaceful. You know, it was very, very lovely. And some of these healers that were also mediums, and they give you like a short message at the end. And a few of them started to say all of a sudden that I was going to be writing music based on my experience. They by then they all knew about my near-death experience, and so I said, "Oh right." So I figured it would be like a short song, because that's all I'd been used to, playing guitar, 3 chords and stuff, you know. And I was trying to write this song, but nothing was coming. But then one day I got this old cheap Spanish synthesizer out, and I started playing around on that for some reason. And these 3 chords came out all at once. Well, more than 3 chords. But this chord sequence came together. And I thought, that sounds really lovely. I like that. So I recorded it. Went out, made myself a coffee, came back in to play it back, and I thought, that is good. And again, I knew I was channeling straight away ideas that were coming through. So I just developed it and just kept it going. So yeah, you're right. I still can't read or write a note of music, but I spoke to my brother, and he said, "Look, I can give you this computer package, which means that you can play stuffing on a you know, on a piano keyboard, as it were, sorry, and then it would like transform into this app, and then it would sort of, the notation would come through. And
technology is amazing.
It's incredible. I wouldn't be able to do it without all that, I can tell you. So yeah, so it all developed from there, and I bumped into somebody. Well, actually, and there was somebody who contacted me, and she was a cellist, but she was also training in homeopathic medicine, and so she had asked if I would be like her kind of trial guinea pig, as it were, for her exams, and I said, yeah, sure. So we got chatting, and she played in this orchestra, and she'd seen my artwork, and she said, "Oh, can we use one of your paintings for our next poster?" I said, yeah, of course. So we did. So I went to the concert, and I told her that I'd been developing this music, and I said, it almost sounds like it could be for orchestra. And I just said that, you know, and she turns around and she said to me, "Oh, maybe we could perform it." And I went, right, I'm going to hang on to that. I'm not going to let that go. So I just kept developing it to get it stronger. And then I went back and said, "Do you remember that conversation we had? Well, how would you feel about having a look at what I've done so far?" So she said, yeah, sure. So the orchestra got together, looked at it, had a meeting, and I said, "This looks really good, and we'd like to perform it." So it went from there, really. And my brother stepped in and helped me tidy up what needed to be done, because he's classically trained, so he could turn around and say, "Well, actually, the computer has written these notes, but it needs to have a few inflections, blah blah blah." And so yeah, so we took it from there, and they had a concert all lined up, and it sold out 2 weeks in advance. So
amazing.
Again,
Look at it, all these incredible synchronicities. I was speaking to a guest on the show this morning about synchronicities in life. It's just uncanny.
Ooh.
Really fantastic.
Yeah, oh yes, the synchronicity. I mean, it's like there's no such thing as coincidence. You know, these things are, the stars are aligned, as they say, for these things to happen for people, and so I could feel it at that point as well, because they'd asked me to. They said, "Oh, we do local press for our concerts, and you know, would you mind doing a quick interview with the local paper?" I said, yeah, of course. So I spoke to the local paper, and just from that one interview, the phone started ringing, and other papers started wanted to know my story and asking me all about it. And then it went from there to BBC TV news, and then it suddenly became a lot bigger. It felt like I could feel this again, this vibration of love going. Ooh, this is feeling great. So it was performed. And I remember my family, we had front row seats, my family and I, which is lovely. The orchestra gave us a front row, and so we all sat there, and we got to the end of the piece, and it sounded amazing to me. It was just brilliant. It was interesting because, of course, I had nerves, but I was so excited as well to hear it play back. Because I've been along to rehearsals, and I remember the very first rehearsal, walking in. And it's quite daunting facing an orchestra because they really are sort of a breed onto their own. They were lovely people, but yes, indeed. And they kind of, and I was kept thinking they're going to catch me out. They're going to realise that I'm not classically trained.
You're faking it till you make it.
Exactly, that's it. So I was like a politician, avoiding answering questions. But no, they were lovely. They were very supportive. But I remember that first rehearsal. The conductor, he said, "Oh, David, would you like to come and tell the orchestra what the piece is about?" But I was so nervous. I said, "No, that's fine. Just rehearse it." He said, "No, come and talk to us." So I did. And once I started telling the story, because it was all about. It was called it's called The Divine Light, which is all about my near-death experience. So I suddenly found that this voice just came from me within that felt really relaxed and confident, because it was such a, the story was so personal to me, and people wanted to hear it, so it was great. And then I remember the conductor's baton going up, and as it slowly came down, those opening chords to the first movement, just the strings came in, and I went, wow. This sounds great. It sounds lovely. And I thought, yes, I pulled it off. It's happened. So it was quite a beautiful moment. I'll never forget that feeling of that very first rehearsal. It was beautiful.
David, that's so beautiful. You've explained it so well.
Oh, thanks.
And I guess we're going to go back to your message, which you feel you came back for. Is one of your messages is to talk to people about not fearing death.
That's right, yeah.
What would you say to someone, I guess, whatever stage they are in their life, that are fearing death?
What I'd say to them is that what I've realised now is that, me included before, that none of us actually really think about it. None of us actually think about death at all. We just kind of put it out of our minds until the moment we're getting close to it. People who are terminally ill, or in my case, had a serious accident and could be facing death. I think it's good to try and think about it now and accept that there is nothing to fear. That there is. Life goes on from here. This is just part of the cycle that we're in. It's interesting because I was invited to France last week to a retreat, and everyone on that retreat were all end-of-life carers.
Wow.
So it was really humbling for me to talk to them, and so I felt great because I felt that I was able to give them a message that hopefully they can pass on to people that are nearing the end of their time here, so it's not just me who's had this near-death experience. There's thousands of people have had them. So it's nothing new. So it's not just me suddenly turning around and saying, "Hey, this happened to me." And I've been speaking to more and more people who've had NDEs now, and when I speak to them, we have this we keep having these moments of, yes, so that happened to you. Yes, yes, I had that too. So it's kind of like real affirmation that this is for real, and the fact that it is for real is it's actually a more beautiful place than where we are now. But also, just when I did come back, I also realised that there's a lot of beauty around me here on Earth as well. I appreciate nature and beauty, and the earth that we live on, you know. And also, the big thing I came back with was self-love. I never had any self-love before, and I needed to tell myself that I'm loved. So, and we all are, and we will all sense that when we get to the other side, that we'll find an awful lot of love coming to us.
That's so beautiful, and it is a recurring theme through all the people that I've interviewed, that self-love is fundamental to our development and our growth and our ascension to whatever it might be. But self-love is absolutely fundamental for anything, for evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think I feel that you're a speaker. Like, yes, other people many others have had a near-death experience, but you speak about it, you know, with such passion and such vitality and energy. And potentially you are a speaker here to eloquently connect with the masses and share your experience. So thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest.
Thank you.
There's
Thanks
always
for saying that
something
as well.
I ask my guests at the end of the show, and
Sure.
because this is a show about passion, and you know, passion inherently is loving yourself and connecting with your soul's journey and purpose. But someone, whether they're happy or not happy, if someone's looking to find their passion or live their passion, what are your words of wisdom or words of advice that you could offer our audience?
Right. Okay.
This is a whole nother podcast, by the way.
No, that's absolutely fine, because I'm going to have to start off with the same point we just said, actually, and that's the starting point is self-love. And once you do learn to love yourself, then you'll find that you'll give yourself a lot more breaks. You know, you'll stop sort of beating yourself up and saying, I can't do this. I know there's no way I could do that. You know, you'll find your mojo, and not only that, you'll find that that synchronicity will come into your life. You know, just go after. Also, authenticity. That's another one. You know, don't be chasing after things that don't really belong to you. You know, just try and go for things that are authentic to you. And if you get on that path, then you'll keep going, and then it'll widen, and all the joys that are meant to come to you will. You know, that's what I firmly believe. And you whatever it is your passion is, will just be fed from all that. You know.
Beautiful.
Flourish.
Thank you, David. It's been a delight to have you on the show. Anyone, as usual, wanting to connect with the guests on the show, please look at the episode show notes to connect with David. So, David, thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest today.
It's been great chatting with you. Really nice.
I've loved
it.
It's been a
Me too.
experience. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.